was the tear that fell from Jimin's eyes as he recalled his first dance with Jungkook, a silent confession of longing, or a hidden regret he's carried all these years. Like, comment, and subscribe now if you want to capture every second of this Jikook story. It's a moment that shakes the heart, a memory that might never happen again. Have you ever seen someone smile while holding back tears? Have you ever felt the moment when a voice trembles not because of exhaustion, but because the heart is speaking louder than the mouth? That was exactly what happened to Jimin when he sat in that interview chair that night, under stage lights that were far too bright for his tear-brimmed eyes, with words that seemed too heavy to leave his lips. The question is, why did the memory of his first dance with Jungkook cut so deep that it brought tears to his eyes? Was it pure happiness, or was it a quiet ache of loss he's kept locked away for years? No one was prepared for the tremor in his voice as he began to say, "I still remember that day," and then paused, as though rewinding the reel inside his mind. Jimin looked down at the floor as if it were the same cold, wide studio floor from years ago, echoing every footstep, mirroring every movement. His voice was soft, almost a whisper, as he told the story of how he and Jungkook first danced together as partners. He remembered the way they looked at each other in the mirror's reflection, speaking few words but building a trust that grew instantly. He was so young back then, Jimin said with a faint smile, though the smile couldn't hide the glimmer of tears ready to fall. But his movements, his energy, I knew from the start he would become someone extraordinary. Between his words came a silence that hinted at something more, something he had never revealed before. There was a secret from that day he had kept all this time. He didn't share it right away. Instead, he let the pause linger, making everyone in the room hold their breath. What exactly did he see in Jungkook's eyes when they danced for the first time? Was it raw passion, or a silent message only the two of them could understand? Jimin admitted that, on that day, he intentionally slowed his steps during one part of the choreography. Why? Because he wanted to see how Jungkook would react. And what happened next was something he could never forget. Jungkook didn't just match his pace. He looked at Jimin with a gaze unlike any other, filled with understanding, as if saying, "I will always follow your rhythm." Those words were never spoken aloud, but from that day forward, they always seemed to understand each other without speaking. As he recalled it, Jimin bit his lip, trying to keep his emotions under control. But the tear eventually fell, slowly yet inevitably, tracing a clear path down his cheek. The camera caught it perfectly, and the moment felt heavier than simple nostalgia, because in the middle of his soft laughter, Jimin slipped in one sentence that struck everyone like a sudden drop in the music. "I don't know if we'll ever have a moment like that again." That question cut through the air like a knife. Did he mean those days were gone forever? Was he feeling an invisible distance between him and Jungkook now? Or was it simply the fear of losing something so precious that it hurt to even think about? The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. No one dared to speak. Even the interviewer lowered their gaze. The moment felt sacred, private, yet too beautiful not to share. Because from every word Jimin spoke, it was clear that, to him, that first dance wasn't just choreography. It was the beginning of a bond only they fully understood. And as always, Jimin never lets his tears fall without reason. That night, he sent a silent message to Jungkook through this story. A message he may never voice publicly, but one clear enough for anyone who can read between the lines. That in every dance, there is a story. And in that story, there are hearts that once met, intertwined, and perhaps, one day, might have to part. Jimin's words lingered in the air like the fading notes of a ballad, wrapping themselves around every heart in the room. The atmosphere was thick, so thick that even the sound of a camera shutter felt too loud. For a moment, it was as if the entire world outside the studio had vanished, leaving only Jimin's trembling voice and the image of that distant memory. The interviewer tried to smile, perhaps in an attempt to lighten the heaviness, but the weight of Jimin's expression made it impossible. There was something in the way his eyes glistened, something in the way he kept glancing away as though looking into a space no one else could see. That space was the past years ago, in a small, cold practice room, where two young boys were about to unknowingly create a memory that would follow them for the rest of their lives. He took a deep breath before continuing, his fingers absent-mindedly twisting together. It was late, I think around midnight. Jimin began. We were practicing for hours because there was this part of the choreography that just wouldn't click. We were exhausted, but neither of us wanted to stop, you know? When you're so tired that you start laughing at things that aren't even funny. That was us. A soft smile played on his lips, but there was a bittersweet edge to it. I remember him standing there, a towel hanging from his shoulders, hair damp from sweat. His shirt was sticking to him because we'd been moving non-stop. And then he looked at me. I don't know why, but it was different. There was no rush in his eyes, no stress, just trust. The room seemed to shrink with every word. Everyone was leaning closer, desperate to know what happened next. The music started again, and for some reason, I slowed down in the middle of the move. I don't even know what I was expecting, Jimin confessed. But Jungkook, he didn't skip a beat. He adjusted instantly, like he knew what I was doing before I even did it. And then, Jimin hesitated, blinking rapidly, trying to hold back another tear. He smiled, just a tiny smile, but it was like he was telling me, "It's okay, I'm with you." It was strange how a moment so small could feel so monumental.
For them, it was just a dance step, a brief pause in a routine. But for Jimin, it was a promise. And perhaps, for Jungkook too, it was a silent beginning of something unspoken. Do you know, Jimin continued, that sometimes I think about that night more than the big performances? We've had concerts with tens of thousands of people, world tours, awards. But that first dance, just the two of us in that room, feels heavier in my heart. He let out a soft laugh, one that was tinged with sadness. Maybe because it was the first time I felt like we were in sync, not just as performers, but as people. The interviewer leaned in, unable to resist asking the question that was on everyone's mind. And now, do you still feel that way? Jimin's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked down at his hands, running his thumb along the edge of his ring. We're different now. Not in a bad way, he quickly added, as though trying to reassure both himself and the fans who might be listening later. We've grown. We've seen so much, done so much. But his voice trailed off, and when he spoke again, it was softer. Sometimes I miss the simplicity of that night. The admission was quiet, but it hit like a confession. And somewhere in that quietness, there was a hint of fear that maybe the simplicity they once shared had been replaced by the complexities of fame, time, and unspoken changes. For ARMY, the implications were endless. Was Jimin saying that the closeness between him and Jungkook had shifted? Or was he simply acknowledging that time changes everyone, even the strongest bonds? Fans would no doubt analyze every pause, every blink, every tiny movement from that interview. Some would swear they saw longing in his eyes. Others would argue it was just nostalgia. But all would agree on one thing: this was not a moment to be taken lightly. And then, as if sensing the questions swirling around him, Jimin added something unexpected. I've never told Jungkook about that night, he admitted. Not really. We've joked about our first practice together, but I've never told him what I felt. I don't even know if he remembers the way I do. That statement was like a match to dry paper. If Jungkook didn't remember, it would mean Jimin had been carrying this moment, alone for years, cherishing it in silence, holding it close like a fragile keepsake no one else could touch. But if Jungkook did remember, then the fact that neither of them had spoken about it meant something else entirely. The mystery deepened, and Jimin seemed to know it. He glanced at the camera for just a moment, as though addressing not the interviewer, but Jungkook himself. If you do remember, he said quietly, then you know. The air in the room shifted again. There was a collective realization that this was no longer just a recollection.